What's in a name? The Wembley show ignited some interest amongst promoters, and the new Frankie were approached to do various one-off shows. Holly got wind of it and then got legal. His lawyer contacted the promoters and insisted they cease and desist from using the name he felt he'd created. The memo, signed all those years ago when we'd realised Holly had registered the name, came back to haunt the guys. They took advice and told Holly's brief to do one. Holly responded by trying to register the trademark. His pending registration was actually spotted by one of our fans that had stumbled across it on the internet. Technology is amazing, isn't it? The guys did a few shows, and from what I can gather, the funds for appearances were pooled together and used as a war chest to fund an opposition to Holly's trademark claim. Ped contacted me and asked me if I wanted to put my name to their action. I agreed. What did I have to lose? I didn't want to partake in the reunion, but I felt I still had my right to a share of the name, and I disagreed with Holly trying to get it all for himself once more. I met with the lawyer and gave them a statement. To be honest, I thought that if I owned my share, then maybe I could use it to my own advantage in some way, and maybe insist that any decent gigs would have me supporting the band. That would have suited me fine. I could have been playing to large audiences again without having to get involved in the nostalgia circus. The case went on for about 18 months and must have cost a good few quid. My contribution was my alliance and my statement, because I didn't stand to gain anything from any future Frankie performances, so I wasn't asked to contribute financially to the cause. The verdict came in. Although Holly felt he had created the name, the band had residual goodwill and had their right to a share of it. Holly lost and it cost him. The battle had been long, and any momentum gained from the Wembley gig appeared to have dissipated, and the offers for shows were not as generous as the band had thought. I can't say for sure, as I wasn't involved, but from the outside it seemed that the reunion was running out of steam. I believe ZTT had been dangling a carrot of a new album, and although the current lineup had written some new material, it transpired that the guys had been played by ZTT again. The offer of a new deal and a new release had probably been a factor in the guys agreeing to do the Wembley show in the first place, but it looked like all promises were hollow. No surprise there then. ZTT again proving their self-interest. They'd use any means necessary to get their own way, and if that involved dangling a few carrots, then it seemed that they were prepared to do it. From what I can gather, Mark had over time become a little disillusioned with the offers on the table and decided to withdraw his services. Ped, Paul, Jed and Ryan told him that they were going to get a replacement and carry on without him. That went down like a fart in a spacesuit. You could probably hear the toys being flung out of the pram in Florida all the way to New Zealand. I don't know the details, but the whole thing fizzled out and Mark wasn't on speaking terms with them anymore. If you want the full story behind this period, then I guess you'll have to wait for one of those involved to write their book. This falling out would place me in the middle of the two parties some months later when we were approached about doing a merchandising deal with a firm called Optiv Marketing in the US. The deal was on the table, but we'd have to set up some sort of company structure to enable payment, but this was looking very unlikely given the current atmosphere between Mark and Ped and Paul. I was trying to get Mark involved, but he was feeling stabbed in the back. Eventually the deal was agreed. Ped and I signed on the band's behalf and the shirts were in the shops. They were selling well and we were owed royalties, but we still hadn't even sorted out a bank account, let alone a company to open one. Mark's blanking all requests to sign and return forms because he doesn't want to be involved with those pair of cunts. A year goes by and there's about $80,000 sitting in Optiv's account with nobody to pay it to. Now, if I was in Optiv's shoes, I think I might have contemplated the action he eventually took. I mean, if we couldn't get it together to open a bank account, how would we get it together to pursue anyone who should refuse to pay? That's what happened. We get a mail from the guy at Optiv telling us some bullshit story that he's had a stroke and that he didn't have the necessary medical insurance to pay for treatment, so he used our money. We knew from dealing with people in the UK who knew Optiv that this was bullshit, but what are we going to do? We got a cyber buddy of mine, a lawyer called Brooke Quatney, to send them a few letters, but they're ignored. Brooke was employed elsewhere and explained that if we were going to chase this guy, then we'd need to get a lawyer on it and it'd be expensive. When this is explained to Mark via email, it's ignored just like the previous mails and we are left hopeless and divided once again. 20% of $80,000 wasn't enough to encourage Mark to work with those pair of cunts in chasing the cash, and we didn't fancy blindly funding a lawyer in the US to do it ourselves, so Stroke Boy got away with it. Rinsed again. My relationship with Mark changed after that. I just couldn't be arsed dealing with him. We're all grown men, and in the greater scheme of things, the dispute seemed a little bit petty as far as I could see. So, almost 20 years on from the band's demise, relationships were fractured more than ever. I'd been on speaking terms with Holly, but that ended when I joined the lads' action. I'm speaking to Mark, but don't really want to anymore. Ped and Paul are not speaking to Mark, and Holly isn't speaking to anyone. I ended 2004 with what had become a regular visit to Jersey for the Christmas holiday. I'd remained in contact with Steve and Jane Law, who I'd met during the band's first visit, and we'd been included as part of their family gathering at the new hotel on the island. Christmas at the Windmills Hotel was brilliant. We joined the Laws, Jane's parents John and Shirley Pack, Jane's sister Liz, and other family members for what would be 10 days of eating and drinking. The hotel had 60 rooms, and all the kids would be paired off and left to their own devices, and the adults chatted, drank and played games every day. I'd get involved in four-handed cribbage with John, Steve and Liz's husband Joe, and we would play for hours on end. Every evening we'd sit down to eat and take turns cooking in the hotel's huge kitchen. John Pack was a retired Air Commodore in the RAF and would often hire a small four-seater plane from the Aero Club and take us out flying around the island. These little jaunts meant he could keep his flight hours up, and he would often let passengers have control and fly the plane. John died not long ago, and the world is a poorer place without him. Every so often you meet somebody who has a profound effect on you, and John was one of those people. After our second gig at Eastleigh, I'd met Liverpool legend Jimmy Case, and he arranged for me to take John to see his beloved Southampton play against Portsmouth in the FA Cup at the newly built St Mary's Stadium. Jimmy and his partner Michelle really pushed the boat out, and we got the full VIP treatment. After the game, we met up with Jimmy in the executive suite and spent time chatting to Peter Osgood, Jamie Redknapp and Gaza. Bobby Robson was in attendance, and John followed him down the corridor to get his autograph. Despite his years, he had the look of an excited schoolboy chasing a hero, and I was delighted to have spent such a great day with him. When I called Jimmy the next day, he commented on what a great fella John was and how much he'd enjoyed his company. John had that effect on people. When he passed, Claire and I attended his funeral at RAF Biggin Hill, and despite trying to keep the stiff upper lip in place, I failed. I don't usually get teary-eyed at funerals, but when the recording of his granddaughter Annie singing The Nearness of You played during the service, the Nash Reserve collapsed and the tears fell. As the years have passed, all the children have grown up and want to do their own thing at Christmas, so we haven't enjoyed the same family gathering, and that's very sad because they were some of my best Christmas memories. Maybe they'll return someday. Claire and I still visit as often as we can, and I have written almost all of this book sitting in their dining room, off-season, staring out over the majestic St. Brolard's Bay. That Christmas of 2004 will be remembered for the tsunami that devastated the Far East following an earthquake under the Indian Ocean on Boxing Day. We were all glued to the TV watching the catastrophe unfold. Almost 250,000 people lost their lives, and the outpouring of aid from the rest of the world was huge. These people lost everything, not that they had much to begin with. When I returned to England after Christmas, I was asked to participate in a couple of benefit gigs. One was in a grotty pub in North London, the other at the grandiose Philharmonic Hall in Liverpool. The Scouse Aid event had been organised by the Liverpool Echo, and my mate Peter Grant invited me to take part. There were lots of Merseyside musicians taking part, including Jerry Marsden, Mel C, Pete Wiley, Claire Sweeney, Les Dennis, to name but a few. I drove up with Noel to perform a new song I'd written called May Your God Go With You. The subject matter was religion and its divisive nature, but the title seemed apt for the show. When we arrived at the venue, I bumped into Pete Wiley. It was the first time I'd seen him in years, and it was great to reconnect with him. We spent the day in his company and laughed throughout most of it. I've never played the fill before, and it was great to have the opportunity. Noel and I walked out on stage to the sound of our footsteps and stepped into the lone spotlight. I felt like Bob Dylan at the Free Trade Hall. We started playing, and the sellout crowd listened in reverential silence. The monitors on stage sounded fantastic, and I could hear the sound of my voice and our two guitars filling the blackness in front of us. It was a fantastic buzz, and when we finished, we were greeted with rapturous applause from what was a very mixed audience. I think it was one of my most memorable gigs, and probably one of Noel's too. After the show, Noel and I went to hang out with my old man and my mother-in-law in a bar over the road where Wiley continued with his floor show, keeping us all entertained. The song I performed with Noel was one of the first ones written for what would be my third solo album. It was going to be called A lo Minimo, which was a Spanish translation of The Minimum, and I planned to use as little instrumentation as possible to deliver the songs. I'd spend a large part of the next year writing and recording the rest of it.